Black America. Still a lot of confusion, a lot of unanswered situations that we're facing. From an historical perspective, all it takes is a little bit of time before things get back to the status quo. We have to recognize that. We have to realize that there are strategies that are successful, and there's no strategy which is no successful. And so I just want to take this time today to just bring a sort of clarity so that we might have a focus on the reality of the situation that we're living with and how to make things better. Okay. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the congresswoman from New York, had an organization that she was very interested in helping. They were struggling, and some young people trying to aid undocumented immigrants in the United States who were suffering. And so she got on Instagram for about an hour, just probably sitting in her kitchen or living room. I don't know where she was sitting, but she was just eating some ice cream at home, just talking. And she raised over $60,000 for that organization in about an hour. Think about that. That's a strategy. They hate her. I don't know if you've seen recently, one of the congressmen, Congressman Yoho, called her out of her name. And she went to the floor of Congress, which she knew was going to be televised, and she just broke it down, and her response, and how his response to her simply reflected in a very real issue that we have in this nation and in the world, but specifically in this nation. And it's very effective. He's probably not going to be running again. He didn't think he would anyway, but he's toast now. Strategy. Very important for us to recognize what works and what doesn't work. Now she's in her 20s, I believe, or if she may be in her early 30s, but I believe she's still in her late 20s. And they hate her, they mock her, they ridicule her. Why? Because they're afraid of her. They said she's dangerous. This particular Congressman Yoho told her that she was dangerous, and she is dangerous to them and their agenda. Recognize what works and recognize what doesn't work. See, we get too offended over people who have no real worth or no real value that can affect us. Intelligent people don't believe that they are better than anyone. Okay? It's simple, because they understand biology. They understand sociology, they understand psychology, and they also understand economics. And so what amazes me is why well-raised, well-spoken, well-mannered, well-educated black people get so offended when people that are obviously less than them don't like them and say disparaging things about them. What do you expect? We have to stop knee-jerk responding every time someone says something, especially if they have no power. Their power is recognizing that you're going to respond. Sort of like that cat when you shine that little light on the wall and move it here and there and there. It keeps chasing after that little red dot. We have to not be that way. That is no strategy. That is no discipline. And we recognize the power of social media. We've seen companies whose CEOs have been caught saying derogatory things about black people. We've seen companies, especially small companies, crumble because of their words and their inability to keep their mouths shut. We've seen locally in Dayton. I remember when Obama became president the first time. And there was a particular, I think it was an air conditioning company or something, that a heating and air company that put out an ad that they were giving a special discount to Tea Party members. The next day, half of his customers canceled their orders. The following day, he put out a big ad in the Dayton Daily News apologizing. Then we had another heating and air conditioning guy just a couple of months ago. make some kind of political statement, but with a negative, a negative tint to it. And so many of his customers canceled their orders. And I don't even think he has survived, or he's really struggling. So we recognize how to deal with the situation. We see the police departments, we see many organizations adjusting and changing. Of course, because they're facing some of the protests, but it's not the protests. There have always been protests, and often the protests are ignored until it wears out. But now there's social media. Now there's a way for everybody every day and to keep sharing and folks won't forget. Like that money, and a perfect example is that money Congresswoman Cortez earned last night for that organization in donations. She had like over 4,000 people donating. Small bits of money. $60,000 plus. It's amazing. That's the power. So we need to have a strategy. We need to have a discipline and recognize certain things work and certain things don't work. An example of a strategy that has no weight, has no teeth, and cannot work is a particular post. This is an example that's on social media, on Facebook right now. It says, the KKK have never been pepper sprayed by the police. Can anyone answer me this? Why? Still waiting. What's the point of that? I think as this is what I learned during the first Obama election. As many of you know, I'm not political, but I was doing a lot of work with young people, especially in juvenile detention and the inner city, and I believed in my heart that young people just needed to see an example of a black man attaining the highest office in this nation, that there was nobody in this nation better than him as far as job-wise. Just to give and I think what the point I was trying to make with that is the same thing I think we all learned. You didn't see too many dry black eyes when Obama won that presidency. It didn't matter what political party you were part of. It didn't matter what economic level you lived on. The fact was something happened that nobody would have ever dreamed could have happened. And at that moment, the entire nation was changed. Black folks were changed. I was changed. As I've shared many times, that was my motivation, to go back to school just to get an associate degree, and I didn't stop until I had an MBA. Imagine that. My 50th birthday, November 11th, Obama won the presidency of the United States, and I decided to go back to school. I was motivated. I was encouraged. I saw something that couldn't have been done. So I decided that I was going to do something that I felt couldn't have been done even in my own life. And that was that inspiration. But when I share the inspiration, the mind revelatory inspiration was not simply to black people, white people as well. Many of them lost their minds, okay? Because their worldview, not only was my worldview changed, their worldview was changed as well. No matter what accomplishments black folks made in this nation, whether it was CEOs of companies or generals in the military, whatever black folks accomplished, there was still one thing black folks had not accomplished. Now, admittedly, there had only been 40. Some white folks had accomplished the presidency of the United States as well, but the fact was no black person had ever been that. And so you could still maintain a little bit of this illusion of superiority when in your mind or in the back of your mind there is something that white folks could do that black folks couldn't do. That was demolished. That was demolished for black people. That was demolished for white people. There was no other sacred vestige, of position that was reserved solely for white folks, and that's what destroyed them. That's why the Republican Party was like, and we're going to make him a one-term president, appealing to the pain in their base. And when I want to say base, it wasn't just the base of the Republican Party. As you recall, when Obama won the nomination from Hillary Clinton, there were many white Democrats that all of a sudden became Republicans. Because this goes deeper than that. I think this is what black folks don't see, and this is why I am not political. Because I've been cognizant of the reality all of my life. When there's never been a black president, yet we were voting for presidents, for Democrat presidents. I think I voted for Reagan once. See, there was never an idea or a belief that a black person could ever be president. So in my mind, I'm not political. I'm not being represented. Now I'm going to get in here and do what I need to do during election time to make sure that my interests are best served. But as far as really feeling a part of the process, I wasn't. And so I have never been political. And it was hard to believe sometimes. It's laughable when black folks will tell you that they're Republicans or Democrats. Because they're not really represented. The presidential office has been filled for many, many years prior to even black folks having the opportunity to vote for who was president. So now that black folks had the opportunity to vote, all that meant was these particular parties are going to try even harder to court the vote of these black people who really are meaningless to them simply so they can attain that office. Okay? So I never saw myself as really being political because the political system did not really represent me. And a case in point is whatever issues we're having today as far as the mistreatment of black folks, the heavy-handed of black folks and other people of color in the street by the governing authorities. Come on now, we have had Democrat administrations, we have had Republican demonstrations back and forth for all of my life. And still the situation in 2020 hasn't really changed. We shouldn't be in a situation like this. We should be in a position of total equality, total peace, civility amongst ourselves as a nation, given all these hundreds of years. So the reality is it's just a trick to placate folks, to placate black people into believing you're a part of this political process. Yeah, you come up and eat at the table. But as far as how the table is going to benefit you, that's something else totally different, and it hasn't. And we have so many people, so many black folks, even the civil rights movement leaders that lived, that survived, that became old. They came to a position of simply selling out. Selling out for that dollar. And I'm not necessarily blaming them. If I were in a position where I saw a situation that seemed almost hopeless, well, I guess I better just make as much money as I can. And so now we are left with, they have recognized the real playing field. See, a guy recently, asked me, he said, well, he's a white guy, and we were having this discussion, and he's trying to set up, an argument. What do you think about, Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson? Come on, we all know where that kind of loaded question is going. I just responded, well, they're just the black versions of Rush and Hannity. He didn't know how to deal with that. I mean, but that is the reality. What you have Sharpton and Jackson, you have Hannity and Rush, and you have all of these politicians and these talk show hosts and all these folks. Well, guess what? I promise you, if you compare your bank account to their bank account, there's a big difference. Why is that? Because they've simply found a niche. They've simply found their entrepreneurial niche base that's going to put money into their bank accounts, and we are that niche. So you have both sides playing us, playing the poor ignorant white folks, playing the poor ignorant black folks against each other. And at the same time getting rich off of us, buying our paraphernalia, investing money, investing dollars. We are simply being used by the powers that be. What I found really refreshing with Congressman Cortez yesterday was that her focus wasn't raising money for herself. Admitted she makes a good paycheck in the occupation that she holds as Congresswoman, but that's what we go to school for. She's a college graduate. but she simply targeted an organization and basically filled their coffers so they're not struggling financially. For them. And that's good. She's going to be an up-and-coming star. She isn't going anywhere. When you can sit on Instagram just eating some ice cream in your living room and raise $60,000 in an hour simply by talking. I mean, she's smart, strategic. They think she's crazy. I think she's gifted. And she's going to be a force for them to reckon with. That's why they hate her. And that's why they hate you. The reason the governing authorities and the powers that be hate you is because they see in you what you don't see in yourself. But until you do, you're not even of any kind of consequence to them. We have to get ourselves together. Now it's my belief that there are not going to be any significant changes in the hearts of these folks required to bring about real change in our nation, in our lives. If it's yours, you're going to have to take it. See, the civil rights movement with Dr. Martin Luther King it was necessary for that time in the approach that he took. Marching and begging and pleading for rights. Only because that was the transition point. Okay. But that's not where we are today. Anytime your oppressor, anytime those that are withholding your civil rights can be offended by your means of protesting their heavy-handed tactics, you recognize they're not trying to change. They just want you to be a little bit nicer about how you demand what is actually yours. But the reality is that's the only way it's going to come. They're not going to change. Protesting isn't going to change anything. Begging isn't going to change anything. Posting little 1 or 2 liners on social media isn't going to change anything. But because you're simply responding to people who already know what they're doing. Okay? I learned that by the time the second Obama win happened, there were people on Facebook that I just had to delete. I had to unfriend because they just wanted to keep arguing. Now I've fallen into it during that first 4 years, but I kept trying to express, well, look at this. This is what he's saying. He didn't say that. This is wrong. This is, trying to put stuff out there that's true. But you can't argue with somebody. You can't have an honest debate with somebody that knows they're lying. That knows what you're telling is true, but they're just not going to agree with you. You can't deal with people like that. So why would you even care to show a video of a black man who gets a 20-year sentence, and for the same offense a white guy gets a 1-year sentence? Come on, they're the ones that gave him the sentence. You think they don't know? I mean, come on now. Or how are you going to argue or video and post on Facebook, them beating down a brother that was unarmed when they're giving this white guy chasing with a knife in his hand every opportunity he has, take him under arrest, and pat him, as far as console him. Who are you showing that to? They're the ones doing it. They already know. We have to take this information, this knowledge that we have, and understanding, and develop a strategy. Okay? And first thing we got to do is we got to stay above the law. We cannot be giving them an opportunity to victim. Let me tell you what happened to me yesterday. So my daughter is hanging out with her friends today. I'm off, and so she wanted to buy a new shirt. And everything's pretty much closed, so we just go down to Walmart, over on Miller Lane. And unfortunately, it was already closed. We got there about 9. We didn't know it closed that early. So I'm coming out of the parking lot in my truck, and the security, these aren't even police, these are white guys, security in a truck of their own. They're in front of me. And he's like driving about 5 miles an hour on purpose while I'm behind him. And the old Marty started coming up. I have a pretty powerful truck. I was going to, go around him. But no, I realized it was a setup. Because if I had tried anything in that parking lot that he was being paid to protect, even though he was instigating the situation, he would be justified in giving me a hard time. And it could have gone physical. So I don't even know if my daughter knew what was going on. It was everything I could do just to be cool, just to drive in front of him, drive behind him very slowly. Then we get to the stoplight sign in the parking lot, where the street goes, the street is right to the left, and as he's stopping, I just go around him, spin my tires, and take off. Because my invitation then was to him to come on out here on the regular public road and then try me. Because then I would be justified in defending myself. Okay? So we have to be wise. No matter how we're tempted, no matter how much wrong we're done, we have to be wise enough to recognize the situation, the environment that we're in. And if you are not going to be victorious in that situation, don't start anything there. I know they're having, because you have situations like that Breonna Taylor deal. We have some kind of black militaristic group down there now saying that within 4 weeks there better be something, some kind of substantial progress in the investigation of her murder by the police. And then they follow with, if it's not within 4 weeks, we're going to burn this down. Now, how stupid is that? What is that going to do? All that is going to do is give them the ability to destroy you, because I guarantee you, as many of you have ARs, I have an AR, I have weapons, but as many of you out there have those ARs, I promise you, the United States government will destroy you. And they're waiting, they're licking their chops, waiting for an opportunity for you to pull something like that, just so they can decimate you and have a valid reason. That was about the dumbest thing to say. Now, if something jumps off, it jumps off. But why would you advertise something like that? Why would you go up and threaten somebody that you know you can't whip? You got to have some strategy, have a discipline. For real. I mean, as I understand now, and I just found this out yesterday, that some of those armed, militaristic-looking, federally funded police, if you want to call them that, who are snatching people off the street in Portland, there are contractors that have been hired. Blackwater is one of the contractors that has been hired. Now, these guys have been functioning. First of all, they have down in South Carolina a big old piece of property where they practice any kind of militaristic action you can imagine, okay? Now, I don't even know if they were called Blackwater. I think they were called Blackwater in this article, but they've changed their names a number of times, especially after that Fallujah debacle when they ended up killing 17 or 20 innocent Iraqis in a square. I think right after that is when those contractors were killed and burned and hung up on that bridge in Fallujah. So facing lawsuits, facing criminal prosecution, Blackwater disbanded and came something else, Al-Qaldami or something to that effect, and later they changed their name to XE. I don't even know how you pronounce that. I was doing some research when I was back in school, and all the companies, whatever the name of the organization is, they're all still using that same property to train with, and their owner, the CEO, is Erik Prince. He was the son of billionaire Edgar Prince. Now, Erik Prince was in the Navy. He was a naval officer. I know somebody that served with him. Ended up starting Blackwater. And guess who his sister is? Betsy DeVos, the education secretary. So it's all a close-knit. So you have these contractors, these military contractors that have been hired by the United States government, usually functioning in other nations against the citizen population of those nations, doing things to those citizens that our military is not allowed to do. Now those things are being done in the U.S. The Blackwater was working with the CIA, renditioning prisoners, people they would pick up that we were not allowed to torture, renditioning them to countries where they could torture. So these organizations, these contractors that are being hired by the U.S. government against American citizens, they're not good guys. I mean, individually, they might be good guys. But the organizations are not good guys. They're just mercenaries hiring themselves out to the highest bidder. And right now the highest bidder is the United States government hiring them against their own citizens. Trust me, this is not going to end well, okay? But no matter what calamity, no matter what situation, you can end well. You can better yourself, but you have to be wise. Look, man, I was coming from the same little shopping center a couple of days ago. And I'm at a stoplight, and all of a sudden I hear this car, this real tough, strong car, engine revving like a muscle car, and then taking off and going down the road. And it's a couple brothers in there, just setting themselves up to be stopped by the police and abused. Why are we doing that? I was in a grocery store just another couple days ago. I do a lot of shopping. Big Brother was in there. Now we're all wearing masks. I don't like wearing the mask. I don't even know that it's necessary, but it might be necessary. But whatever the situation is, it's the requirement now. So I'm wearing those masks. Everybody in this whole store was wearing masks except this big black brother and his kid. And I'm saying, why are you doing that? We need to have strategy. We need to have discipline. Pick your fights. Don't let your fights pick you. Don't get caught up in struggles and conflicts that have no overall value that's going to better your situation. So it was more poignant to me that he was there with his little kid who was probably about 5 years old. And he's sending a message to this little kid. So this is what our ignorance does. Our ignorance just doesn't sentence ourselves to lives of turmoil and struggle and no real progress. It also sentences the next generation, which is what this guy was doing. It made no sense at all. But see, the people in this store, he was kind of big. They were just afraid to tell him, okay? But he's not helping himself and he's not helping his kid. We're sitting here, even if we as adults can't see where anything that we do is really going to benefit ourselves, we have to begin formulating strategies so at least so our children don't have to live through what we have lived through. Recently there was a big funeral for John Lewis, one of the great civil rights activists of the 60s. And they were some amazing and interesting people. They had different strategies from each other, and a lot of times they argued and disagreed, but they had one particular purpose, and that was to get us from where we were to where we needed to be. He carried that baton. So all I'm suggesting today is if we're going to be being passed that baton from Lewis and from Elijah Cummings and for all these old brothers and sisters that are passing away, we have to know which direction we're supposed to be running. We're going to have to know how to run, what it is we're actually doing. We need a strategy and we need discipline. I'm just suggesting the situation out there is not that difficult. It's to recognize that they're targeting folks that they can abuse. So if you break the law, if you do something that allows yourself to be taken into custody, you're open for abuse. And you're just begging for the mercy to not be abused. And so I'm not suggesting that we have to roll over just so we're not abused, just so we're treated right. I'm saying use some wisdom, use some strategy, stay out of trouble, get yourself together, use all of your energy into bettering yourself physically, for real, relationally, educationally, economically. Get yourself together. Quit doing drugs, quit drinking alcohol, quit going out. We are at war right now. It's not the time for that. Now, I'm not saying just acquiesce to a sub-citizen level, because we know the truth. This white guy came up to me the other day, and he was like, well, I saw, Chris Rock did this comedy stand-up, and I don't know, maybe you just don't want to hear this. I was like, go ahead and hear it. I had already heard it. I knew what he was going to say. Chris Rock said, you want to know how to get the police, stop abusing you? Would keep your mouth shut. I shared with this gentleman that we're not, black folks, brown folks, people of color are not looking to be treated better than anybody else. We're not looking to be treated any worse than anybody else. If everybody's being treated poorly, it's civil rights to be treated poorly as well. But just don't treat one group better than you treat another group. Well, when I was in the military, one of my first assignments was Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio, and it was a pretty lax base back then. That was in the 70s. And I had a beard and long hair. As it was like that. A lot of civilians, it was just lax. Then I went over to a base, later in northern Japan. It was a naval facility. It was not as lax. I didn't mind. Because as long as everyone is being treated the same, there's nothing to complain about. So no, as long as white folks have to keep their mouths shut so they don't get beat by the police, there's no problem with black folks having to keep their mouths shut, okay? We want it to be equal. We want equality. That's it. But it's not that way. So in the meantime, keep your mouth shut while you are bettering yourself. That's all I'm saying. Stay out of trouble, but don't just stay out of trouble and live your life like that with your mouth shut. I mean, stay out of trouble long enough to better yourself. Keep your mouth shut long enough to get yourself together. Don't give him an opportunity to harm you, like that guy in that parking lot, that security guy. He was driving real slow, hoping I'd just zoom past him while he was still in the parking lot. He would have an excuse to challenge me because I was acting up in the area that he was responsible for protecting. So I went slow enough behind him, which was really hard for me to do, until I got to a point where I could zoom out, squeal my tires, send him a message, and give him the opportunity to follow me out here and then see what happens. All I'm saying is choose the battleground. As Sun Tzu, as many of you know, I've been a student of Sun Tzu probably the last 30 or 40 years. And you pick your battleground. There are certain battles that you don't partake in. You don't fight every time. There are certain battlegrounds that you stay away from, that you can't win. If you can't win, or if the enemy has the advantage, don't fight there. Only fight where you have the advantage. Okay? And if you don't understand advantage, then it's time for you just to be quiet and chill. Get yourself together, and as you're getting yourself together, your worldview will change. As you begin to get more economically sound, your worldview will change. As you get to become more healthy, your worldview will change. As you begin to garner more education in your life, your worldview will begin to change. And as your worldview changes, you will begin to understand which ground is desirous to fight and which ground is desirous to avoid a fight. Now, there's another Asian proverb that tells you, I think it's a biblical proverb as well, about counting the cost. A wise king counts the cost, knowing that he won't run out of money, before the project is through. In Sun Tzu, it's like you have to sit back and determine the battle before the battle. Okay? And so that when you enter the battle, you will be victorious in that battle. But you just can't be out here responding every time people piss you off. Every time people make you mad. Because what happens is you're going to find situations arise that you can't win. Like George Floyd, for example. He's a perfect example. Whatever he was doing, he did not deserve to die. And he may have been passing a bad bill, but he did not deserve to die. But what happened? Passing a bad bill, gets jammed up, gets caught by the police. Now he's in a situation where he's at their mercy and they murder him. Okay? Don't put yourself in that position. Don't be in that situation. Avoid the situation. What I do, there are many times that you just have to ignore the situation. And I'm not now even talking about a fight or a conflict. There are times you just ignore people. Like there was a post, I think, on Facebook, maybe yesterday, the day before, about two people that went out to Walmart, I think, and they're wearing like face masks, but they have Nazi emblems on them. Okay? Why have we posted that, and why are we tripping about it? First of all, if you have any amount of intelligence at all, you recognize the Nazi flag, or the swastika, represents Nazi Germany, Hitler. Soundly defeated. Hitler finally blew his own brains out. Many of the Nazi leadership we lynched, we hung, okay, from the Nuremberg trials. And many of the other ones just fled and were able to disappear into the populations of various nations for a time. Some of them were captured years later, put on trial, and are in prison today, or killed themselves. But the point is, why does the swastika bother you? Even as black folks. Swastika doesn't even have anything to do with black folks. It has more to do with Jews, not biblical Jews, but the European Jews. You don't hear them screaming about it. Why are black folks tripping about the swastika? Jesse Owens, I think, was the only black face that we could really attribute to the Nazis, and he soundly defeated them on the track field. So to me, I don't see why black folks are tripping about the Nazi emblem. Okay, we tripping about things we shouldn't. And what we should be tripping about is our lack of education, our lack of good health. I mean, I'm watching I don't know if it was a Burger King or what kind of advertisement it was about some giant Whopper or two for $5, whatever they're giving. It's this big old brother on there. I'm glad he's making some money, but he is out of shape. He is not going to live very long. He's probably very unhealthy. Why are we celebrating that? But guess what? It's a positive advertisement, and it's probably going to sell because we cannot see the reality of what we're facing, which is why we've been in this situation for so many years. Let me tell you what, now this might sound kind of controversial, but I don't blame white people for the situation that we are in America today. I blame black people. Come on now, we're the ones who dropped the ball. You can't expect the oppressor, because they haven't changed, blame it on them. Come on, our people have gone through too many changes, too many positive steps, benchmarks, outside from being brought here as slaves to now be blaming our situation on those people that our ancestors have already proven could be broken away from. Their situation was a lot worse than ours. I mean, of course, relatively speaking and all. But it's up to us to continue this thing. Quit asking for your rights and begin taking your rights. You can't take your rights if you're drunk. You can't take your rights if you're suffering from dying from diabetes because you don't have any self-control even what you eat yourself. You can't take what is yours if you don't have the ability, the education, the mindset, the wherewithal to do so. So it's not on them. It's on us. We're the reason we're still in this mess. And we're the only ones that are going to get out of this mess. Come on now, why? What incentive do they have to change? The people that we're comparing ourselves to on Facebook, answer me this. How come the KKK are not being sprayed? What incentive do they have to change? The only ones with incentive to change is us. Quit begging for change and begin demanding change. And in order to demand change, you have to walk with a particular uprightness. Man, I look often like, as an example, the Tuskegee Airmen. How they walked with excellence. How they flew with excellence. How when they finished flying, the bombers would specifically request for them to fly with them. Because they were people of excellence. We have to be people of excellence. We have to be supermen. I'm telling you, when you look at us, look at our accomplishments as black people when we put our minds to it. From a sports perspective, from a music perspective, from a business perspective, from a military perspective, and even from a presidential perspective. You saw how gifted Obama was. I don't care what they say about him. You know better. So how do you get that way? That's walking in perfection. That's walking in excellence. That's walking in integrity. We need to be there. Admittedly, he came back, he smoked some weed, did a little coke. Who hasn't? Many people haven't, I guess. I don't know them. But the point is, it doesn't matter how you started. And my point to you is, it doesn't matter how you are at this moment while you're watching this program. I'm telling you, from this moment on, change. I shared with you many times, I had an epiphany. I was out there, man. I was doing the buzz. I was in the streets all the time. I was drinking constantly. My life was I was just doing what I wanted to do. There came a moment, I was 28 years old, I had this revelation, this epiphany at home. The next day, I was different. The people they saw at work when I left work that day was different than the person that came back to work the next day. I was 28 then, I'll be 62 this year. You have to decide, make a change. This moment. Don't wait till after that bag runs out. Don't wait till after you finish that bottle off. Pour it out. Dump it out. At this moment now, change. And I'll tell you what's even more powerful. Your children. Children are so pliable. Children are watching. When your child sees and knows what kind of person you were, and sees the decision that you made, and you've changed, you have taken the limit off of that child to be whatever it was in life they want or desire to be, simply by proving to them that at any moment you can just determine this is destructive, or this is not positive, or this is simply not the way I want to go. And they can become whatever they choose to be. Now, my kids never saw me in that state. But you know what my kids saw? My kids saw their dad, a hard-working man, a mailman for years, 15 years at the post office, decided with a high school diploma, decided to go to school. 10 years later, has an MBA. 10 years later, now this is how it works. When you decide, everything else continues, especially if your act is clean, you've cleaned up your act. Now, so I was at the post office for 15 years. I decided to go to school. 10 years later, I got my MBA, but what else do I have? I also have 25 years at the post office now with an MBA. Plus, I've been walking for 25 years, especially like those last 10 years. I'm healthy because I'm not smoking anything. I'm not drinking alcohol. I'm trying to eat right. So this is what I've done. I increased my lifespan by getting healthy. I increased my education. I also increased my time with the government, so I've built up a better retirement, 401k, all that stuff. Now admittedly, at 60 years old, is the age I was when I earned that MBA, I won't be able to do the things I could have done had I earned it when I was 25, okay? But still, what can I do? What I can do is, my children have seen. My children didn't know me when I was out there doing all that other stuff, but they knew me when I had a high school diploma. They watched me go to school at night while I was working in the daytime. They watched me earn an associate degree, a bachelor's degree, an MBA. They can do anything. So I could, well, it doesn't benefit you. What you going to do now? My children, I've changed their worldview. I've changed the potential trajectory for their life from the limitation on what it was to what it can be and what it is today, okay? So like I'm telling that gentleman that was walking around Myers with his little boy and didn't have a mask on, come on, brother. What lesson are you teaching your children? Are you solidifying the minimalist trajectory your life is on in the life of your child? Or are you opening up to something else, recognizing there's something greater? I'm telling you how powerful is that child, whether you believe there's a virus or not. That child is going to recognize that if I want to protect myself, I need to take action, wise action to protect myself. So even if there isn't a virus that's going to hurt you, that child seeing you put on a mask because you think there could be, and that child putting on a mask because now that child thinks there really is and I'm saving myself, you're giving him a self-defense, a self-preservation strategy that will help him in so many other areas the rest of his life. When he sees something that might be wrong, I'm going to take precautions so that doesn't happen to me. When I see a path that may not be a good path, I'm not going to go that path because it might be harmful to me. You demonstrating a mask for your child, even if there is no virus or even if there is no issue, that mask to that child, watching dad or mom wear it, and them wearing that mask is going to affect and change their lives to be more active and proactive about making the right moves. So in every kind of way, if there is a virus and you're not wearing a mask, you're being stupid. And if there isn't a virus and you're not wearing a mask when everybody else is, you're sending a very ignorant message to your child that's not going to benefit them for the rest of your life. And let the rest of them do it. You know, really that whole mask or not mask issue, a lot of it is political. You find a lot of folks not wearing a mask because somebody told them not to. It's funny how that somebody that told them not to, now they're wearing a mask, and these folks are still not wearing a mask. I mean, come on now. So I'm not even in that mask thing. I hate wearing them. I don't even like wearing them myself. I just try not to go too many places, you know. But the reality is we have a lot of work to do. The thing is, the work that we have to do is not difficult. We just have to change our attitude. Change your attitude, the situation is going to change. It's going to get better. Now look, I've written 2 books. I've written like a total of 6 or 7 ebooks. They're out there. But 2 in particular are I mean, one of them is selling very well. But they're very inexpensive. It's not the price, it's the content. And what I'm afraid is that we get so set in our ways that we refuse to consider anything outside of what we already believed, even if what we believed is not benefiting us. Okay. So one of the books I read, the second to the last book I wrote, is called "To Be Black in America and to Not Die: The Strategies and Discipline." Come on, that's what we need. See, when I say not die, there are different kinds of death. Death, the obvious one, is when you're alive and then you're dead. But to be dead as well is not to be able to attain what could have been your potential. Okay, that's death. That's stagnation. Okay, and as well, simply not attaining anything, just maintaining a status quo. And I guess to me, the worst is not even realizing you're dead, not even realizing the issues that have got you so far beneath what your life potential could have been. You don't even realize it. That's just where you're dwelling. Sort of like that guy without a mask, in Myers the other day. And so to be black in America and not die, is spoken to every level of black person in this nation, because whatever level we're on, we do experience some negativities, and if we buy into those negativities or don't respond to them the right way, it is in effect a type of death. Okay, so to be black in America and not die, strategy and discipline. And what I've really done in that book is I've gone back into black history. We get to express from the time we got here in this nation everything that we went through, all the way up to the place where we are today, and what's going on today. And it's very important because we think we know. White people think they know. Black people think we know, but we really don't know. And there are reasons why we self-sabotage. And as I'm suggesting here right now, that we need to clean up our act and stop doing the things that we're doing. Some of the things that we're doing seem so natural that we can't stop. But the moment you recognize why you are doing the things that you're doing, we don't respond to hardly anything from a conscious perspective. We're being moved, we're being prodded from on a subconscious level based on environmental experiences and situations that have formed who we are. They're moving us to do certain things that who would be self-destructive intentionally? So why are we doing self-destructive things? It's deeper, because the depth goes to why are we content doing things that we know are not really good for us. Alcohol, for example. Alcohol is poison. You're poisoning your brain. Drugs, the same thing. You're poisoning your brain. The more real drugs today, those harsh drugs today, come on now. Why are people self-destructing when the most basic trait of all animals, and human beings included, is survival? There are deeper reasons. And when you see those reasons, you'll be well. I touch on in this particular book, generational PTSD. Now we could take a GI, and I'm a veteran, we could take a GI that comes back from a battle zone, maybe he spent 3 years in combat, say, in Iraq or Afghanistan or something. And he's got PTSD. And we expect and we appreciate and we realize when making certain choices and attitudes and things that are not quite right. Sometimes we give them drugs, we give them this, but we recognize there are emotional issues and this negative psychological ramifications. What we used to call shell shock. We used to call battle fatigue. Now we call it PTSD, post-traumatic stress. We recognize that there are issues from unresolved traumatic emotional experiences. Okay? But what I'm sharing with you today, that's just from 3 years in combat. Take generational PTSD. Generational. I don't even want to say PTSD, because PTSD means post-trauma. This trauma has never been resolved, but we'll just call it PTSD. So you have the slave trade, and you have people taken from their lands and taken across the ocean. Many of them died. Terrible situations. Slavery, heinous, torture, butchering, rapes, molestation, and slavery. That's trauma. That would be a PTSD. The problem is it never ended, so it's not post. And now that family in trauma, living in trauma, has babies. Those babies are taken away, raped, butchered, whatever done to them. These babies are born into the trauma. And the next generation born into the trauma. So now you have hundreds of years of families that are in trauma that would normally be considered post-traumatic stress, and they have babies before that trauma is resolved. And then more generations are born. Generations upon generations are born into trauma. No wonder folks are acting so crazy today. We need to see that. I've spelled this out in this book so you can see it with your eyes. That light bulb can go off and you can say, oh, now I understand. The moment you understand, you're well. You'll stop. I don't need to do that. Now I know why I'm doing that. Now I know why I haven't been able to continue in a healthy way. Now I see why I'm doing all these self-destructive things. That's to be black in America and not die. Very important. And we'll give you strategies and disciplines at the end of the book on how to be well. The book I just finished recently, maybe about a week and a half ago, is called, it's called Up from the Ashes, The Rebirth of the Black Man. And so that right there, that book is having a very difficult time selling because of the title. I can't seem to, I've tried to reword it or rename it or reintroduce it, but both books, and this book as well, is for black folks and white folks. But I'm taking this more from of course, a historical perspective, but as well a religious perspective. To recognize what we have bought into from a religious perspective, how it's damaging to us, and how the religion is okay, but just has to be looked at, from a different perspective, from a perspective that hasn't really been addressed. And so, I used one of the introductions once that, that maybe these church doors being closed are being closed by the hand of God. Because Scripture tells us that no man can open a door that God has closed, but no man can close a door that God has opened. So if these doors are closed, and can't be opened, it's because that God has closed them. And nobody, the secular world, they can't close doors that God has opened. But just because you're calling yourself a religion, or just because you're calling yourselves Christians, or just because you're calling yourselves children of God, doesn't mean you are. And it may very well be at this time in our particular, life in this nation, it's time to take the blinders off of the church who've been perpetrating. I mean, come on, a lot of the harm, a lot of the pain, a lot of the killing and the suffering that black folks have had to endure at the hand of the governing authorities has been met with ridicule from many with church ties. Many calling themselves Christians. A lot of the negative, harsh political rhetoric is directed toward emboldening and energizing Christian base. I mean, come on now. Something is wrong with the church that's not Christ-like. It might very well be God shut the doors. And so I'm giving an understanding and insight, taking black people, for example, and introducing black people to the church that from a perspective that we haven't seen. See, as far as the church and black people go in this nation, the church, the religion, the Christian religion is simply something that Massa gave to the slave, and the slave, like we have done in so many other areas, we have perfected that religion. But the religion, the Bible, Scripture speaks of a foundation. Now, this is not the religious program. And all I'm saying is, so let me just back this up, is a foundation that the European church, as the European religion, is the sand and is not sturdy. It was built on a lot of evil, a lot of wickedness, a lot of exploitation. And black folks have just perfected the church based on that foundation, that European model. And I've just taken from biblical Scripture, let me just, the role of black folks in, when you look at Jesus and the suffering, we recognize from a religious perspective that the divinely instituted, that those chosen by the divine for a greater purpose usually suffer at the hands of the enemy of the divine. But the divine always wins. And so that's Up from the Ashes, Rebirth of the Black Man. I believe, just like in the other book, once your mind is reborn, once you have that aha moment and recognize why things are and see a path in order to be better, at that moment you're reborn. Rebirth of the Black Man. Well, that's about it. Lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. So that's what I'm offering you today is water. We can be well. For real, we should be. Well, I do want to thank you for joining me once again and listening. And I want to invite you to listen again. You take care.